Well, in what was a dramatic end to the penultimate Senate sitting week yesterday, the government's bill, the union-busting bill, failed to pass the Parliament with One Nation and Malcolm Roberts, Pauline Hanson and Jackie Lambie and the Greens and Labor all voting against it at the last minute. Now, of course, that meant failure for the government. Last night, Hanson said she changed her vote as a result of the Westpac scandal, with voters telling her the government seemingly had one rule for white-collar crime and much harsher rules for blue-collar crime. That's weird because she certainly spent plenty of time working with the government on amendments to the bill, and their amendments the government accepted. I'm not so sure this is a good move for her electorally. I think she'll cop a backlash, but it's probably a little early to tell. What is interesting, though, that I want to get into tonight with my panel is all this talk about China and foreign interference. We know today that Andrew Hastie, the MP for Canning in WA, was the official who put the Chinese would-be defector Mr Wang in touch with ASIO. How serious is all of this? And how much is before our intelligence agencies? And how is the foreign interference scheme put in place by Malcolm Turnbull being administered inside the government, away from the politicians and down with the public servants? No shortage of contentious issues for us to get in tonight. Director of Research at the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild, joins me here in Melbourne. Sky News regular and man of common sense, Warren Mundine's with us as well. An opinion writer with the West Australian and the Daily Telegraph, Gemma Tognini, is with us from Perth. Let's just start. Gemma, you and I were just talking off there in the break before we get into these other issues, but what did you make of Georgie Crozier? She's the Victorian Shadow Minister for Health. That conversation we just had about the government saying they're not keeping these gender statistics, but also a new health levy.
Well, first thing that struck me as absolutely extraordinary is I don't buy the government's line that they're not keeping statistics. I mean, first of all, if that is the case, then that is absolutely concerning and outrageous and, in my view, bordering on negligent, because it's the government's role when it's administering things like this to keep track of that kind of data. All hospitals do it. We know that they do. You would know that, Peter. But for an issue so delicate as this, and she did make the point that it's not an ideological thing. It's a duty of care thing. Some of the stories that she talked about made me incredibly concerned. If you're a parent and your 14-year-old child is talking about identifying as another gender and you're the last person to know, that's incredibly concerning. And I guess the other observation around that, Peter, is that, you know, if you've got a 14-year-old child on any other issue, if they were caught drink driving, if they were caught committing a crime, the first people they call are the parents and the guardians. But when it seems like on this gender issue, there's this conspiracy almost to keep parents out of the mix. That's one issue. But in relation to the new levy, let's call it a tax, a levy is a tax is a tax, it is incredibly poor budget management. As you know, Peter, I run a business in my day job, and I often observe if I ran my business the way some of these governments run their budgets, I'd be out of business in 30 seconds flat. It's an extraordinary thing to try and re-tax Victorians for something like this. It is a red-hot, steaming pile of manure as far as the eye can see. But yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if you add up all the taxes we pay in this country, federal taxes, state taxes, we're absolutely overtaxed in world terms. But some people would be upwards of 60%, you know, with all of the state and even, let's count local council, local government taxes as well. I just can't believe that when they mismanage the budget, they look for an issue where there's general, you know, community concern. They'll whack a levy on that. If they need money next time round, it'll be called a childcare levy or a childcare tax. There'll be one for oldies. And this is budget bastardry.
It is, and it's just another lazy tax grab. And I think it's wrong to hide behind mental health as a way of raising taxes. Mental health is a serious issue for a lot of Australians, and to use that as a front for trying to raise more taxes is very concerning. And you're right about the budget issue. It's so bad in Victoria that the Andrews government has actually gone to the Chinese Communist Party to help fund its infrastructure project with its One Belt, One Road. They've signed on to the One Belt, One Road project, which is a way of the Chinese Communist Party getting a foothold into nations right around the world to use their leverage with funding infrastructure to try and influence what's going on. They've done it around Europe, in Africa, and now they're in Australia and Victoria to help fund it. So this is a really concerning development, and it shows just how mismanaged the budget is here in Victoria.
Warren, we're going to go into some other issues, some other federal issues, but I just want to grab you with your background in Labor politics and other things as well as Conservative politics. How do you think Pauline Hanson changing her mind at the last minute, walking away from commitments to support those in the construction construction industry who say that they're subject to, you know, bullying and harassment by heavy-handed unions, how's this going to play out for Hanson, in particular in Queensland?
Look, before I get into that, I've got to go back to that gender stuff. Here you got 1,300%. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's
No,
gone
you're
up.
right.
It's gone up.
Yep.
And we've got people out there lobbying governments continually about, oh, we should higher the age of criminality because kids have got, you know, their brain hasn't developed yet. They haven't really worked out themselves. Yet these are the same people who are sitting there and saying 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 13-year-olds, we can actually go in there and change their gender and start programs in this. To me, this is totally criminal. You know, I agree with Gemma when she made that comment that they don't keep statistics. What sort of crazy people don't do
well,
that?
They do, Warren. They would, because they build the Commonwealth.
They're
they build
lying.
Medicare for services inside hospitals.
They're
and
lying.
There's no way the states would be doing it for free.
No, they're lying. That's what they're doing. And you've got such a serious issue. You mentioned in regard to criminality and all this other stuff. The parents are involved. We should have learnt from going back to the gay. Areas where we have to bring the parents, we have to bring everyone together and go through this as a team. Look, I just find this criminal. I reckon anyone who is involved into this gender changing things for kids under 10 and 13, 14 should be actually charged with crimes. And I predict in the next 10 to 15 years you're actually going to get people suing doctors and suing governments because of what happened to them when they were a kid. Now moving on to the Labor government and that.
The Hanson vote. I'm interested in the Hanson vote. How's that going to play out?
Look, I think this is. I'm gobsmacked by her performance in this area. She's gone away. She denies that she did, but it's quite obviously that she's had a conversation with the government and they've agreed to it. She got all that she wanted, and then she comes out and comes up with a mealy-mouthed thing about governance on banks. Now, we know that the government's going for the Royal Commission stuff, and they're getting legislation through to deal with some of these issues, and you just saw a few CEOs and chairmen have actually lost their jobs and gone. And then you look at the issue of governance. It's almost like the unions are a protected species. That me as a private sector person, I sit on a number of boards. We got more laws controlling how we should be behaving and what we should be doing, which is correct. We should, and yet you get these unions can get away with blue murder. And Pauline Hanson comes out and says, oh, you know, and comes up voting against this legislation. And also Jackie Lambie, you've got to say Jackie Lambie made the commitment that she was not going to, she was going to support the legislation unless John Setka sits down. Well, he's out today tweeting how great a victory it was today, and to me they look like fools. And they need to get back to start focusing on what's the best thing for governance and laws for all Australian people.
Yeah, and look, let's be very clear. You know, she made the point about white-collar crime and blue-collar crime. The union officials, this is who are targeted inside the bill, not ordinary union workers. You couldn't get a more white-collar sort of mob that are union officials.
They are.
They are not off the
when I was working
anymore.
there, I was one of the only few blokes who worked in a factory. The rest of them all went to law schools and industrial relations schools and did all this. They wouldn't even know what a spanner looks like. So this idea that they're blue-collar workers is a joke.
Yeah, well, actually next week I'll put a list up on the screen. I've got a terrific little list of who comes from what union inside the Labor Party and their scholastic achievements. As I said, not many of them are the old sort of Labor types, the Chifleys and others. I want to go to you, Daniel, though, on this whole issue. We've been talking about China ad nauseum, it feels like, for the last couple of weeks. Foreign interference laws brought in by Malcolm Turnbull are meant to deal with the scourge of people inside decision-making corridors being bought out by foreign entities, foreign states, foreign nationals. That's not how it's playing out when it's left to the public servants to administer the framework. What can you tell us?
Well, that's exactly right. This is a very big, explosive issue. We have a situation where unelected bureaucrats are using these laws, which, as you say, were intended to address issues such as Chinese influence, and instead they're using them against Australians for their political views, and in particular using these laws against Conservatives like Andrew Cooper, who's of Liberty Works. He organised the CPAC, the Conservative Conference in Sydney. It's been used against Tony Abbott. And we put in a Freedom of Information request with the Attorney General's Department to find out how they're using these laws. And they came back and they didn't adhere to our request, but what they said was there's 1,300 documents that relate to how they're using this law in relation to 4 search terms: Tony Abbott, Andrew Cooper, CPAC, and the American Conservative Union, who worked with Cooper to host CPAC. 1,300 smoking guns of how the bureaucrats are using this law against Conservatives in Australia. So what needs to happen is Christian Porter, the Attorney General, needs to tell his department to release the 1,300 documents. Australians have a right to know how are these left-wing bureaucrats using these laws to target other Australians of their political views. And I believe that the Secretary of the Attorney General's Department needs to stand aside whilst there is an investigation into what is happening in the Attorney General's Department. These are not the actions of one rogue public servant, as the Attorney General suggested. This is a coordinated, secretive operation designed to attack Australians and harass Australians because of their political views. It is a big issue and it's not going away.
Yeah, 1,300 documents. I've done plenty of time myself working on FOIs inside government, but 1,300 documents is a sizable FOI, Gemma. And I spoke myself at the CPAC conference. If Tony Abbott's only crime is fronting up and speaking as he did on the record at CPAC, I'm surprised I haven't got a letter. Any other Conservatives have probably got one in the mail. It's probably on the way. Warren was there. Goodness me, Warren, you'll be in trouble for sitting on my table at the CPAC conference. I mean, this is outrageous, Gemma.
I'm very upset that I didn't get a letter.
Well, it's probably coming,
It's
Warren.
one of the 1,300, Warren.
Coming, Warren.
The point
What
that,
did you make
that I
of it,
want to
Gemma?
make about to Dan's point, he's absolutely on the money, but tactically this is really foolish, I think, by the government to withhold these documents. As an old journo, you know that when you cover something off, it becomes worse than the original sin. It just compounds the problem, and that is a swag of documents. And circling back to the language that was used, accusing Tony Abbott of being an agent of foreign influence. I mean, that's not just accusing someone of barracking for the wrong footy team. That is a significant accusation to make, and the questions keep mounting on this issue, and they keep mounting in relation to how this agency is conducting itself. And the longer that they try to hide what's going on, and they are doing exactly that, because refusing to respond to the FOI in that fullness means that they are trying to hide what's going on, the worse it's going to be for them when the truth eventually does come out, because the truth always comes out.
And where was the media is happy, the left-wing media is happy to talk about right to know when it comes to national security
That's exactly
information.
right.
Where is the media on
Exactly
Australian
right.
public's right to know of what unelected bureaucrats are doing with laws that are there to try and keep Australians safe? That is the issue. And where is the media? News Corp is very good on other free speech issues, but the left-wing media only talks about freedom of speech, only talks about transparency when it suits them. This is a massive issue, 1,300 documents. It's not going away. The Attorney General needs to come out and needs to release the documents and needs to get it sorted.
Hey, can I just ask you, because the IPA was involved in lodging the FOI, did you lodge the FOI with the department or with the minister?
With the department. So it went into the department because they're the ones...
So that means there's a departmental public servant decision maker. The decision maker's not in the minister's office. So the government's not themselves withholding the documents from you. It's the public service.
It's the public service, but it should be the minister should be directing them to release the documents.
They can't really do that in the FOI, but
that's
what
right.
you could do, can I give you some advice? What you could do is put a similar FOI into the minister's office, because I have no doubt the backside covering that goes on in public servants, there'll be a minister's office contact, indeed the minister himself, copied into documents that will be in and out of the public service and in and out of a minister's office. So at least the minister might be able to release some that might be sitting in his office from his own public servants. But
Very good suggestion.
there you go. There's
That's
free advice
right.
here on Credlin. I want to move on to another issue. Warren, what do you make of this decision by the federal court? They're now saying that someone who comes to Australia would be applicant coming to Australia out of the Medevac legislation as the auspices Nauru and Manus Island, they don't actually have to be seen by a doctor. How does that work?
That's the whole bizarre thing, and it also, belled the cat, if you'd like to say. This was never about medical Medevac evacuations, people with serious illnesses or anything like that. It was really about how do we get people off medicinal, and it was a backdoor into getting these people into the country. It was a total fraud from day one, and the court has now come out and really belled that cat on that one. What we got to do is get that as in the crossbenches in after this episode with the union legislation, the bill. I mean, you've got to start seriously looking at the crossbenches, because we've got to get that repealed. It's a nonsense thing, and now we know the truth about the whole thing. The whole thing was never ever going to be about medical services or help or anything to people, and it was really about a backdoor of getting people into Australia.
Gemma, I'll give you the last word here. We expect this legislation to be back in the Senate next week. Jackie Lambie's the holdout vote. We don't know what the one issue she says there is that she will turn her vote on. She's not told us publicly about that now, but do you think that she's going to support it?
Well, I would have said yes before this whole union-busting legislation palaver this week. You would have said yes. My view is that she must, on the balance of evidence that's before the Australian public about how this legislation is being used and how it's being interpreted. I mean, the court decision simply interpreted the legislation, right, as it sees it, which simply proves, as Warren said, it simply proves what many commentators predicted beforehand, that it's not about medical welfare. It's not about welfare, it's about access. And Jackie Lambie, in my view, absolutely must vote with the government on this.
Gemma Tognini, Warren Mundine and Daniel Wild sitting here with me in Melbourne. Thank you all very much for your time. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, Peter.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Peter.
You.